Hi, my name is Clarama Dorvilius. Great to have you here. So this video is going to be about basically 5 fundamental elements that you will need to be a successful VR developer. And when I say successful, I don't mean like billion-dollar successful VR developer kind of thing, although these will apply if that is the goal. I just mean, the ability to, like, when you're coming into VR, to be able to finish a task or finish a project or whatever clear goal you have. These are the 5 fundamental building blocks of the VR development experience. Okay, so let's go ahead and get into it. So the audience for this is going to be people who are brand new to VR, who are interested in learning, want to have their expectations managed. Maybe they're not clear what the flow looks like. Maybe they may not have peers to go to kind of see what the high-level overview is. So I'm going to give you a high-level overview by way of explaining all the different fundamental elements that make up VR development, period. Elements that I'm going to mention are not all of them are going to be a requirement, especially when we get into things that might not be accessible in every single country and all of that. So I will explain some workarounds and how to adjust for those potential gaps that you might have in resources that will help you be successful in your development journey, especially if you're new to VR in general. First, before I continue, I'll give you a little intro to me. So I'm currently right now a product manager at Meta Reality Labs, also known as Oculus. I've been working there for about a little over 3.5 years now. Before I joined the company, I was actually a VR developer. I had a company and I was delivering apps to Fortune 500 companies for training purposes. Prior to that, I was part of Oculus Launchpad in 2017. Project got picked up for funding, and I was able to launch my first published app onto the Oculus Rift platform back in 2017. Some of you guys might not be familiar with that console, but it was the first Oculus consumer version headset that was powered by the PC and had the touch controllers, and it was really fun. And then prior to that, I built VR apps for Google Cardboard, with the Android phone. I've also built for Quest as a hobby, and just for a variety of platforms. So I'm more than happy. I've seen it all. I have been in a lot of different communities, hackathons, and so I'm really excited to share a lot of the learnings that I've had over the years to help provide clarity for all those people who are coming in and navigating this space for the first time. Before I joined VR development, I was in the website 2D world, much different than the VR developer world. So I'll go over a little bit of what those components are and how the differences can be. Not to say it's not transferable. There's definitely, if you have a technical background, obviously the learning curve is going to be a lot shorter for you. But for those who do not have a technical background, but let's say you're a designer, if you've used tools like Photoshop and Illustrator and Premiere Pro, you'll actually have an intuitive sense about how the game engine works in particular. So if you don't have a technical background, you don't be intimidated. Don't be too intimidated, at least, by the game development process or the app development process in and of itself. It's actually not as complex or hard as you would think, just because there's a lot of tools and frameworks and all of that stuff to make it very much more easier. The most essential element that you'll need when it comes to building for VR is the game engine. There are 2 really popular game engines that are out there. It's Unity and Unreal Engine. If you are new to VR, you might have a technical background or not. Unity is, I think, the best recommended path to take for the journey of learning over time. That's not to say Unity isn't the preferred choice for developing or publishing an app to, like, let's say, an Oculus Quest platform. Actually, majority of apps that are on the Oculus Store and App Lab and most other VR platforms are made with Unity. Unreal Engine in and of itself is a great engine as well, and they actually are starting to make a lot of progress towards being more palatable or accessible to more newer developers in the onboarding phase. So definitely check that out. That's something you're interested in. I'm going to focus on Unity because I do think that is currently the most widely supported, broadest community of new developers and experienced developers alike, and it's just really great documentation and easy to it's more accessible to someone who might be on the learning journey. Those who are interested in Unreal, I would recommend Unreal for like an established studio. You're going to be working with really high quality, really advanced level graphic technical designers and graphic artists who really want to get the maximum impact of a game engine and are comfortable with C++ and working and configuring the game engine in and of itself. I think because Unreal Engine gives you the source code to their engine. To do some really boundary pushing things with VR in and of itself. And if you're not there, then don't worry about Unreal Engine. At least that's what I would say in my personal opinion today. Granted, there are some people who do start out with Unreal Engine, so I will say that. They have great I think it's called blueprints, which is basically templates, like you just get it up and running and started, basic interactions. I think it might get a little bit more complicated when you want to do more full-fledged things. Then you're going to have to be much more technically proficient in how you navigate the experience, but both great game engines just have different pros and cons. Again, beginner route, if you're on the learning journey and you're looking for support from community or friends or peers, Unity is a great starting point to go off of. Now, can you build VR without a game engine? Yeah, you can. So if you're somebody who doesn't, because these game engines do sit on PC or Mac. So if you don't have access to a PC, laptop or a computer or a MacBook, any of that, but you really want to build for VR, you can. And let's say maybe you, for example, let's say you're in countries outside of the US, maybe you only have access to an Android smartphone. There is something called web VR, which is basically you can build VR experience for the browser. So you do need access to Wi-Fi, but on your Android phone, you can go to A-Frame and you can start playing with the code there. And so that's something to look at as well. Some people might have a question of, well, what if I have a Mac? Do I need to have a PC for VR development? I highly recommend getting a PC, and usually those are a little bit more affordable, making sure that the GPU and just in general the specs meet the requirements for VR, as well as the RAM. I think it's the RAM space. I started out building on a Mac, and I think it's great if you're just getting started. If that's all you have right now, you don't have the ability to get a PC and you just have a Mac, you can build on for Quest using Unity, especially if you're just new. That's totally fine. Where you'll start to see problems is as you get more proficient in VR development, you're going to want to preview or play your apps in the game engine itself just to see how it's running. And unfortunately, Mac GPUs just don't really meet the requirements needed to run really complex graphical apps in real time. And so what you'll see is anytime you want to play back or experience or test your app, you'll see a lag that might take a few seconds or 10 seconds just to run it. And so over time, once you get more proficient, you're going to probably want to start jumping to a PC. Okay, so that was the game engine. The next most important piece is the hardware. And that is the VR headset that you plan to build for. Now, Quest right now is obviously the most widely consumed headset, therefore the most popular to build for, and ironically enough, relatively the most easiest headset to build for as well. When you're not comparing it to PC VR. If you have a PC and you have access to a Rift or a Rift S or an HTC Vive or those type of headsets, then PC is definitely the most easiest way to build for. But if you're trying to potentially move your career over into this metaverse vision that the world is heading in, theorized by many, and you're looking to potentially maybe become an engineer or work for a studio or work for a Meta one day, then I highly recommend learning to build for Quest devices. Now let's say you're in a country that doesn't have access to Quest. Yes, the company only distributes to a certain amount of countries so far due to policy issues, blah, blah, blah. it's a long story, won't go there. Good news is Quest is built on the Android platform. So when you're building for Android, you're essentially building for Quest. So if you remember back in the day when Google Cardboard was a really popular way to view VR experiences using the Android phone, that flow of to build an app for Android and to run it in VR is actually very much similar to the Quest flow. So if you don't have access to a Quest, no worries. If you have access to an Android smartphone, you're already there. Again, you don't really need hardware to build for VR. There are frameworks like VRTK, which I'll get into, and other tools that allow to make it easy for you to be able to build your experience and have a simulator emulate what that would look like in headset, where a hardware becomes really valuable. So when you want to ship to those type of platforms, you have to meet requirements for the performance of the app. There's certain requirements, like for example, it can't drive really big bugs that might mess up the user experience for Quest users on the platform. So with that, you will need to test your app, the device itself that you're looking to publish it to make sure that your app is running optimally with every single code change that you're making. So that's when the device comes in handy for building in VR. So with that said, once you have your game engine and then you have your device, configuring it, it's going to take up the biggest time in terms of your onboarding, because the Quest device is made for consumers, and the game engine needs to recognize VR. The game engine in and of itself, all game engines, weren't necessarily designed with VR in mind, but they are now starting to get adapted to work with the VR devices, and they're keeping up as fast as they can with as the VR devices get more and more complex and advanced. So configuring them together will take some time and can be a bit frustrating. You got to enable all the developer mode to the headset. You got to make sure it can communicate and its USB data is able to transfer between the headset and your laptop, and you got to make sure your game engine, if you're using Unity, recognizes when your headset is plugged and is able to send the apps that you're building onto your Quest, so you can, or your device of choice, so you can play and check out your experience in the immersive way. Once you have those two pieces down, then you get into the third part, the coding. So this, again, you get here when you're starting to get more complex into the interactions. It's not necessary if you don't plan to be a developer or an engineer, you just kind of want to build experiences. Coding is not necessarily a necessary part of your development until you start wanting to add custom functionality for your experience. And also, you can build apps without coding sometimes. Like, it's actually not hard. My first VR project that I built, I worked on it for about 4 months, but I was able to build the full experience without having to touch a line of code. So yeah, just know that it is very much learnable to anyone, but and it's equally challenging regardless of experience level. So if you're new and you're coming across a lot of challenges, just know even those with very much years of experience will come across those same frustrations or challenges today. And it's just the nature of VR development, building for a bleeding edge technology platform that's constantly evolving at a rapid pace. You can use 2 languages for coding in VR. That's JavaScript and C#. Now, granted, all you JavaScript developers who got excited about that, it's not the most powerful way to build your experiences in Unity. If you want to have the maximum use case and I think there's less JavaScript support for Unity, VR development in Unity. So I highly recommend checking out C#. At least I'm also very biased. I'm very light on my JavaScript knowledge. However, I've worked much longer in C#. I just find it much more of an easier language to understand and easier to implement in VR. Especially in Unity as a game engine. When it comes to coding in Unity, it leverages a style called object-oriented programming. Now, this is different from 2D development. When you're building websites, you are not necessarily building code around a specific, let's say, element in your CSS or while you could change elements leveraging like a mother code, a class script or something, functionality on what you can do on a 2D screen is just limited. With the added dimension of 3D space and all kinds of human inputs beyond just drag and drop and mouse point and click, you now have hand gestures, you have body like collision, you can still use eye gaze, but now it's like across all different types of objects you might have in your environment. Basically, it's almost potentially limitless in terms of the types of inputs you could almost leverage or create for VR. So with that said, object-oriented programming is what enables this to happen. So if you're not familiar with object-oriented programming, it's basically every single object that you have in your environment, you can add a script of code to it and it can run agnostically from other code or scripts that you might have in your experience. An example of this is I can have a door in one scene of my app, and every single time I touch that door, let's say the door opens, I can have 10 different doors and to have 10 different scripts that has attached to each and every single door that might do something different. Obviously, probably not the most scalable way to code, but it is possible to code for that. And that's actually probably easier when you're a rapid prototyper to just do stuff like that. But obviously if you're a more scaled coder, you're going to work in a corporation, working with 30 people, then having a centralized way of building a library that you can reference and modify in different areas of your experience is also possible as well. If you really want to learn how to develop code from scratch, you want to start building some really cool custom functionality, my favorite online tutorial is Bracky's C# class on YouTube. I think it's the best C# course I've ever taken online. I learned C# when I was in grad school, but obviously like when you don't use it much, you lose it. And I just feel like it's a great refresher course if you haven't tried it in a while, or haven't, used it in a while. And if you've never learned code before, I think he does a great job of educating and in his tutorial style of putting it into plain English, what you're doing, how you're doing it, and being able to see right away what the code that you just wrote is doing. So I will put the link down below. Definitely check it out. He's no longer doing videos anymore, but let that be a testimony to how amazing his videos were, because it's still, I think, one of the best tutorials right now. Now, let's say you don't really want to get into C# or you don't want to get into the coding. You just want to build cool things. There's a great framework that's going to get you started. That's called VRTK, Virtual Reality Toolkit. Now, this is an open source framework created by the Stone Fox, who has a great community. It's been around since 2016, and it's really amazing for just getting started really quickly. So he has some great YouTube tutorials on how to get started. So this means that you can build environments, interactions, movement, locomotion, all without having to code. You can just copy and paste what he's got and what people have contributed to the framework, since it is open source, and start to build and run your idea, or rapidly prototype an idea you have. And lastly, YouTube University. Like, these are all, when it comes to coding, like, always go to YouTube. Sometimes you might not want to learn the whole language, or you don't want to learn, you don't want to learn how to cook, you just want to make the pasta. If that makes sense? Like, you don't need to learn the fundamentals of cooking, you just kind of want to make a specific pasta that you saw in your restaurant and you had an idea that inspired you to make this type, and you just want to learn how to make that particular recipe. YouTube is great for that. That's how I got started learning my first VR project. I just watched like a 7-minute video. It was how to make your first VR app in 7 minutes. And it was just opening Unity, getting it configured for the Oculus headset, and then creating a room, adding the walls, playing with the lights, changing the color, and then adding movements and like just some basic objects in there. And then boom, you can export the app onto your headset and you have your first app. I love those tutorials. Or let's say you want to just learn how to make a score counter because you're going to make a basketball play, or how to make how to change scenes or change to different, apps within the experience, of going to a different level. If you just want to have like if you have a very clear, like small goal of how to do XYZ, YouTube University is a great place to go and to find those 20-minute, 30-minute tutorials and just follow along and build that part of your experience onto Unity. I can't recommend that style enough, and really that's how I think the majority of people are learning to develop in VR. Number 4, to be successful in your VR development journey is having clear goals of what you want to build. I mean, obviously it's hard if you don't really understand the scope of what you can build or cannot build. Like, for example, building a multiplayer networked game is going to be a lot more complicated in scope, especially if you're a solo developer, versus just making a single player app where you're just shooting a basketball into a hoop. Those are two different things. So I would say if you clear idea of what you want to build, and then just take small steps towards building it. For example, like create milestones. Today, my milestone is going to be setting up my Unity game engine to work with my Quest device, and being able to export an app into my Quest device using one of the Oculus samples, for example. That will be your day one. It might take you a few days goal. Another goal could be, just even being able to enable development on your device, your Quest device, or configuring Unity for VR development could be your another milestone. Another milestone will be, creating my environments. Another milestone, learning how to put a skybox around my environment, or lighting, change the lighting, add a player, a first-person perspective. I think just, creating milestones and clear-cut goals along the way to your learning journey will be a much easier way to stay motivated in your VR development journey, because it does get challenging. I can't stress that enough. VR development is not for the weak. It's not for the weak. And it doesn't matter how much experience you have as a VR developer. VR development is shifting sands right now. It's always constantly changing. Every 6 months there's a new Unity version update, a new device headset capability, a new code base for how you call certain methods, or how you call certain assets for your game, for your app. It's just constantly changing. So really everyone's always a beginner, and only the experienced people, the advanced people, are people who have been through the trenches enough to have developed their intuition to kind of deduce and troubleshoot and have it what likely went wrong. But ultimately, other than that, trust that any frustrations you've experienced as a newbie is not much different from someone who's been in VR for 7 years and will likely face. So I can't stress that enough. Lastly, and then probably the most important for having a successful VR development journey, is finding community, finding people you can ask or go to for help, and ask the dumb questions that you feel like are dumb. There's so many people right now who are learning or in this vulnerable space who are really excited to build something. I think finding a Discord community or a Slack community with other VR developers, or even finding people in real life, going to a hackathon or conferences, or even on Facebook groups, and where you can kind of struggle together, I think is a necessary component to VR development. I don't think I could have gotten through especially a lot of my troubleshooting issues, if it wasn't for people who were around me, even if they weren't VR developers, which most of the time they weren't. But sometimes one time I had an issue where I upgraded the Unity version, and so my project all of a sudden had a million different bugs, and I literally did not know how to delete the old Unity and regress it back to the former Unity version. And having a friend who was like, oh, just use Clean My Mac. It's some, third-party software that you get one thing for free, where it finds all the different pieces of a specific app that you want to delete across your computer, and it'll delete it. And so I used that, and thank God was able to recover my project just in time for my graduation debut. So like I said, just surrounding yourself with other builders or developers or creators, even if they're not in VR, I think is just really helps you stay motivated and resilience, because one thing you're definitely going to need is patience, relentless willpower, optimism, alongside your clear goals, and just have fun with the process. I think something that makes VR development so fun, despite the frustrations and how challenging it could be, it's almost like a game where it's like it can take you a day to solve one little problem, but when you solve it, it's like, life-giving, and it makes you feel like a god, like you know what I'm saying? So like I just enjoy the being able to overcome those challenges, because you will, as long as there's such a, like I said, there's such a great community, there's so many people who's putting great stuff out there, and maybe you'll be one of those people out there as well. But a lot of people are documenting their journeys out loud, so you get to learn from other people. And when you, again, like when you come across an issue, being able to leverage the documentation, ask other people for help, you build relationships as well as build your grit, and and get to enjoy the highs of reaching a milestone and seeing something created that you did and you got there, going from 0 to 1, and you have your own experience that now you built for yourself. There's just nothing like it. There's nothing like building your own VR experience. It's just a magical feeling. And so if that's something that is interesting to you, as much as I, said there, like I said, there's a lot of challenges, but the return of investment, the trade-off is so worth it. So worth it in the end, to have your own app that you can have other friends jump in and play and experience. So with that said, good luck to you on your journey. I will post links below. Hope that was helpful. Again, let me know if you have any feedback. I'm happy to answer anything in the comments. Or feel free to add your own if you feel like there's certain things that I missed or that you feel are also necessary, or want to share your own story. Let's start a conversation down in the comments. Like and subscribe if you want more. Thank you for joining.